Jimmy Braddock was born in 1905 in Hell's Kitchen, New York City. He's one of 7 kids. His parents were Irish immigrants. They were poor. And like most poor kids, Jimmy got into boxing. And he was pretty good at it. He started making amateur appearances in the 1920s. He won the Golden Gloves tournaments in 1925 and 1926. And that's when he decided to go pro. He was 21 years old. He was an up-and-comer, and he was popular with the crowds around New York and New Jersey. By 1928, he'd become the #1 contender for the light heavyweight championship, with a record of 44 wins, 2 losses, and 2 draws, 21 knockouts. That's when he got a title fight against Tommy Loughran, the champion at the time. But he lost the fight, and in the middle of it, he broke his right hand. Braddock's career fell apart after that. His hand never healed, and he lost his confidence. He also lost like twice as many of the fights after that as he won. He'd re-break his hand in almost every one of the fights. He decided it wasn't going anywhere, and it was time to give up boxing. Jimmy Braddock became a might have been, a never was. He'd taken all of his winnings from the time that he fought, and he invested them in a taxi cab company. But when the Great Depression hit, the business failed, and he was bankrupt. He went to work at the docks. He tended bar. He did any other odd jobs that he could find just to support his wife and his 3 kids. But it wasn't enough. Broke and humiliated, Jimmy Braddock had to go on welfare. He had to draw government assistance for the money just to feed his family. In 1934, Jimmy Braddock was at the lowest part of his life. His old manager came to him and he said, "Jimmy, I got a fight for you if you wanted it." Corn Griffin was this young up-and-comer. He was a strong boxer and people were excited about him. They thought that Corn Griffin had champion potential. And they needed a big guy like Jimmy that Corn Griffin could show off against, beat up and knock out, get some attention. So they offered Jimmy Braddock $250, 2 days before the fight, $250 just to show up and get beat up by a young kid. Jimmy Braddock had been retired. He was barely eating himself to make sure that his kids had enough food to eat, and he had done 0 training. But it was $250. So Jimmy Braddock took the fight. And then Jimmy Braddock knocked Corn Griffin out in the 3rd round. People thought it might have been a fluke, but they were excited. A local guy, a working class guy, just beat this young up-and-comer. They loved it. The crowds loved it. Another fighter, a young guy named John Henry Lewis, was an up-and-comer. He wanted some attention too, and he knew how popular Braddock had been after the Corn Griffin fight. So John Henry Lewis went and offered him $750 for a fight, thinking it would be an easy win. Braddock got lucky, and plenty of people would watch the fight. Braddock took it, and then he beat John Henry Lewis. The #1 contender for the heavyweight champion, Art Lasky, came to town. Just within a couple months of this, thinking nobody could possibly get lucky 3 times in a row, they offered Braddock a fight, knowing that he would pack the arena. People wanted to see this guy from the docks come and beat another potential champion. Braddock needed the money, so he took the fight. He broke Art Lasky's nose and he beat him in 15 rounds. Braddock took his winnings from that fight with Art Lasky and he paid back the government all the money he'd received for welfare. Somehow Braddock had become the #1 contender, and he was given an invitation the next year for a fight against the world heavyweight champion, Max Baer. Listen, Max Baer was a monster. He had killed 2 fighters in the ring already. Baer was a 10-1 favorite, but Braddock, just for taking the fight, would take home $31,000. No matter what happened, that was his purse for this fight. Just for showing up, $31,000. So Braddock took the invitation. He accepted the fight. Baer didn't take it seriously because Jimmy Braddock was nobody. He'd just gotten lucky a couple times. But Jimmy Braddock took it seriously. He outboxed the champion that night. He won 9 of the 15 rounds, and Jimmy Braddock won a unanimous decision. He went from being a dock worker to a heavyweight champion of the world in 1 year. just by accepting the invitation to show up and get in the ring. Jimmy Braddock lost his next fight to Joe Louis 2 years later as a champion. He lost the championship 2 years later because it was Joe Louis, who is one of the greatest boxers there's ever been. But Braddock made $320,000 for the fight to Joe Louis. And he worked it out in the contract with Joe that Braddock would get paid 10% of Joe Louis's winnings for the rest of Joe Louis's career. See, boxing wasn't about pride or ego anymore for Jimmy Braddock. It was about character. Braddock was a champion apart from boxing before he ever got into the ring. He just accepted the invitations to show up, and he fought hard, and he did what needed to be done. You look with me in Proverbs chapter 9. I want you to see what King Solomon writes. He says this, starting with verse 1. Wisdom has built her house. She's set up its 7 pillars. She's prepared her meat and mixed her wine. She has also set her table. She sent out her servants, and she calls from the highest point in the city, "Let all who are simple come to my house. To those who have no sense," she says, "Come, eat my food, drink the wine I mixed. Leave your simple ways, and you will live. Walk in the way of insight." This chapter has 2 invitations, and in between those 2 invitations, there's this interlude to explain why some people are going to accept the first invitation, and some people will accept the second invitation. The first one's from wisdom. It says, wisdom has built her house with these 7 pillars. It is well built. It is sturdy. It is stable. She has prepared her feast, and she invites the people in. All people, even and especially the foolish people, the simple people. She invites them, the has-beens, the never-was, those dock workers that are not making ends meet. She says, wisdom calls out to them, come. Come in and change your life. Leave your simple ways behind and live, actually live. But then in verse 13, there's this other invitation. It says, folly, foolishness is an unruly woman. She's simple and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house on a seat at the highest point in the city, calling out to those who pass by, who go straight on their way. She calls, let all who are simple come to my house. To those who have no sense, she says, stolen water is sweet. Food eaten in secret is delicious. But little do they know that the dead are there, that her guests are deep in the realm of death. Wisdom makes her invitation, and then folly, foolishness makes hers. She knows nothing, but she still invites people to join her in their ignorance and in their foolishness. And what does foolishness offer in this invitation? What does foolishness offer to foolish people? Stolen water and death. That's it. Solomon says that's all that foolishness has to give you. Stolen water and death. She offers them nothing, but people still come. They still come because they know the docks. And maybe it's easier for them to just stay at the docks. Maybe it's easier for them to just keep living with their hand out instead of fighting the good fight that wisdom requires of us. But even if it's easier, you're still just drinking stolen water. It's all you get. Stolen water and death. Well, right in the middle of these 2 invitations, look at what Solomon writes. He says, whoever corrects a mocker invites insult, but whoever rebukes the wicked incurs abuse. Do not rebuke mockers, or they will hate you. Rebuke the wise, and they will love you. Instruct the wise, and they will be wiser still. Teach the righteous, and they will add to their learning. Fear the Lord. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. For through wisdom your days will be many, and your years will be added to your life. If you are wise, your wisdom will reward you. If you are a mocker, if you're foolish, you alone will suffer. Why do people accept an invitation to foolishness instead of an invitation to wisdom? Because wisdom requires us to climb into the ring. Wisdom requires us to climb into the ring of correction and instruction and responsibility. Wisdom punches you in the face sometimes because we need punched in the face sometimes. But you don't get the purse if you don't show up for the fight. You don't get the reward, and it says wisdom will reward you. Foolish people will insult you, they will abuse you, and they will hate you for offering them a better life. But wise people, they'll love you. They'll be grateful for the opportunity, and they'll be better for it. Who are you? When you have the opportunity to do something hard but right, how do you respond? Wise people don't settle for stolen water and think that they can do it on their own, and that's good enough. They want something more. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. Until we decide to live in the reverence and the awe of that divine presence of a God who holds all things together, including our destiny, there is no way that we will choose to accept an invitation to fight and work for a better lives for ourselves, for our families, and for our communities. Because until we accept the truth that He really is the one that holds it all together, that He really does know better than us, and He can do for us what we cannot do for ourselves, we're going to remain in the delusion that somehow we can name ourselves the champion of our lives just the way that we are. And it doesn't make any sense. But that's what foolishness is. Solomon says your wisdom will reward you. But if you're a mocker, you alone will suffer. Accepting the invitation of wisdom or of foolishness is a matter of character. It all comes back to character. And character is the product of and revealed by the personal choices that each of us make in our life. The invitations that we either accept or the invitations that we decline are the indicator of our character. Ultimately, your life and your destiny are your responsibility because you choose what type of life you're going to live. If you don't like the life that you're living and you don't choose to change it, that's on you. And it's a character issue. Fools will get angry and abusive and hateful when they're presented with that truth. But wise people will own it. They'll climb into the ring and they'll do what needs to be done to change it. You can't fake this stuff. People try to fake it all the time, but it doesn't work. Even if you're surrounded by people who are faking it too, it still isn't believable because it never works. People can see right through it. You can't sit in the cheap seats of the auditorium and claim to be the champion when they can all see the guy in the ring right in front of them. The Rabbi Hillel taught this. He said, in the place where there are no men, you be the man. In the place where there are no men, you be the man. Don't sit around drinking stolen water, trying to convince yourself it's sweet, when God is offering you a real and actual feast in His wisdom. He's been inviting us to join Him and live ever since the beginning of creation, but too many people never respond to and accept that invitation. Jesus tells the exact same story that Solomon does. In Luke chapter 14, listen to what Jesus says when He's teaching about Himself and about the kingdom. He says, Jesus replied, a certain man was preparing a great banquet and he invited many guests. And at the time of the banquet, he sent his servants out to tell those who had been invited, come, for everything is ready now. But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, I've bought a field and I must go see it. Please excuse me. The second said, I just bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me. And another said, I just got married. I can't come. The servant came back and he reported to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and he ordered his servants, go quickly into the streets and the alleys of the town. Bring in the poor and the crippled and the blind and the lame. Sir, the servant said, what you have ordered has been done, but there's still room. Then the master told his servants, go out to the roads and the country lanes, the highways, compel them to come in, so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those who was invited will taste of my banquet. We have to understand that the invitation to wisdom that is made all through the Bible is the same invitation to come to Jesus with our lives. Because it tells us in 1 Corinthians 1:24, Jesus is the wisdom of God. To come to wisdom means to come to Jesus. And to think we're wise and we've never committed ourselves to Jesus Christ is absolute foolishness. It's drinking stolen water. Jesus is the wisdom of God. And Jesus himself uses the exact same picture as Proverbs does. And we see it play out the same way. There's a great banquet prepared, and there are many who are invited. But just like in Proverbs, instead of coming to the feast, people choose excuses. They make up reasons why. I don't need wisdom. I don't need Jesus. I don't need to do it. I'm a good enough person the way it is. It's working well enough the way it is. I have my field. I have my oxen. I have my relationships. I don't need to come to Jesus. I don't need to be fully committed to the will of God in my life and his wisdom for who I am. I have my job. I have my things. I have my reputation, my own goals, my own wisdom, my own understanding, my own plans for my life. And what if wisdom or Jesus just gets in the way of that? But that's all still just stolen water. Like, what are we settling for when we choose to accept the invitation to foolishness instead of the invitation to wisdom, to life, and to Jesus Christ? We can say we've accepted that invitation to Christ, but we still live in the house of foolishness. We can't fake it. It doesn't work. It's all foolishness, and it doesn't work. And when it doesn't work, and it doesn't work, and it doesn't work, then we begin to make excuses as to why it's not working, even though we've been faking it. We make up excuses why our life isn't what we want it to be. Well, I didn't have the same opportunities as everyone else, and this person or that person, they did this or that to me, and the system was rigged, and those people were out to get me. You got to know the right people. You got to have the right name. You don't know where I was raised or where I come from. I just don't believe what other people believe. And we have these excuses as to why our life is miserable, why we're not winning, and why things aren't working. And it's all foolishness. Because we've been invited to wisdom and invited to Jesus as much as anybody else in the world. It's us. The truth about all of it is character. It's character. The choices you make determine your character, reveal your character. You either make the choice to accept the invitation that God has given all people to the house of wisdom and to give their lives to Jesus Christ, or you make the choice to go and live whatever time you have in the house of foolishness, where there's just stolen water and death. Jesus and wisdom might punch you in the face. They probably will punch us in the face because we need punched in the face sometimes. Coming to wisdom will not leave you foolish, and coming to Jesus will not leave you broken and sinful. It requires us to change. It does stuff to us. But coming to foolishness, accepting that invitation, it will leave you right where you are now, where you've been, and it will lead you to worse places. It will lead you to death and to suffer alone. Those are the choices we have. Jimmy Braddock could have stayed at the docks. He could have kept working odd jobs, and he could have kept relying on handouts from other people to live the life that he didn't want to be living in the first place. He could have done that. A lot of people do. But Jimmy was given an opportunity to do something harder, but better. They said, Jimmy, just get in the ring. Even if they knock you out, you're going to get a payday. So he took the invitation. He was the man, and he did what needed to be done for his wife and for his kids. He did what needed to be done for his legacy and for his community. See, Jimmy Braddock inspired everyone else that was barely making ends meet or not making ends meet, that they wouldn't have to rely on handouts and welfare for the rest of their lives either. Him being the man reminded that all the other men that were sitting around watching him, they could do it too. And they did do it too. And when he got in the ring with the Brown Bomber, Joe Louis, he probably knew there wasn't much of any of a chance that he could beat him. But Jimmy Braddock knew that accepting that invitation was the right thing to do. Joe Louis was beating him so badly in that fight because he was an amazing boxer that in the sixth ring, Jimmy Braddock's manager said, I'm going to throw the towel in. I'm going to throw the towel in. And Braddock said, don't you do it. If you throw the towel in, I will never talk to you again. He said, because champions don't get don't give up. Champions get counted out. He went back out and he fought. And in the 8th round of that fight, Joe Louis hit Jimmy Braddock so hard in the face that it cut his face open in 3 places. It put one of his teeth right through his mouth guard. Jimmy Braddock's body went limp before it hit the canvas. Joe Louis hit him so hard that Jimmy Braddock needed 23 stitches in his face afterwards. But you know what Jimmy Braddock didn't need? He never needed to worry about where his kids were going to get their food from. The right choice isn't the easy choice, but it's still the right choice. Choosing wisdom isn't easy. And choosing to follow Jesus, it isn't easy, but it's the right choice. Choosing foolishness, doing it your own way, choosing sin, cutting corners, and thinking that the water is sweet, it's wrong. It never works. It's the wrong way to live your life. The invitation's open. We get to choose. Make the right choice. Make the right choice for your family. Make the right choice for your spouse. Make the right choice for your kids and your grandkids, for your legacy, for the people that are coming after you. Make the right choice for your community. Choose Jesus. Make the right choice for yourself. It's Jesus. Because Jesus and only Jesus offers us life, real and living, the things that we long for, that we've always longed for. Everything else is just stolen water and death. Choose him. Commit to him. Where there is no man, you be the man. Fight that good fight.